Recording in progress. Got it. I'll just got it. All right. Well, thank you to Leslie and TCHA for having me here tonight. And I want to thank my husband for getting us technically set up here. He's been doing that for me for quite a number of years now. And he also is the muscle behind moving all my books around. So the experience of writing Divided Paths, Common Ground back in 2010, that's when I wrote it, turned out to be more than I imagined that it could be. And it was a privilege to tell the stories of important Lafayette and Purdue women, the university's founding females, I like to call them. And I'm getting, well, he's gonna have to come back. Not letting me go forward. Yes.
There you go.
There we go. Yeah, very good. All right.
Click on that surface area if it gets away.
If it gets stuck. Okay. Well, Dean Emeritus of the School of Home Economics, Eva Goebel, there she is, had the idea that a book should be written about Mary Matthews, Purdue's first Dean of Home Economics, and Lella Gaddis, the first state leader of home demonstration in Purdue's Agricultural Extension Department. When I first met Dean Goebel, she lived in University Place in West Lafayette, and she was about to turn 100. In 1941, Lella Gaddis hired Dean Goebel as a Vigo County Extension agent and later to be her successor. So during the course of writing Divided Paths, Dean Goebel and I had some nice visits, and I had lunch with her, and she bestowed her wisdom and stories of both Mary Matthews and Lella Gaddis. Soon after the book was published in 2011, we were sitting together in her living room holding the book. It was hot off the press, and Dean Goebel smiled and said, "I wanted to get this done before I died," which proves to me that you can have goals and accomplish them at any age. Dean Goebel passed away in 2017 at age 107. Yes. Another woman who helped me with my research was Miriam Ethel-Peace. She is Lella's great niece-in-law, and she graduated from Purdue School of Home Economics. Miriam told me stories of Lella's personality and accomplishments. She provided the family genealogy, photographs, and much more that I will talk about in a moment. Miriam sang in the home demonstration chorus, directed by renowned Purdue music director Al Stewart. And I wrote about the unbelievably large chorus of women in Divided Paths. At the Home and Family yearly conference at Purdue, women from home ec clubs all over the state sang in this chorus in Elliott Hall of Music. And that's me and Miriam when I gave a presentation at Westminster, where she lived. So the title, the book cover, the title conveys the seed of what the book is about, but as I gathered information through archival research and interviews, the book sprouted to be so much more. Mary Matthews brought science into the home, educating women at Purdue when she was named first dean of the School of Home Economics in 1926. Mary established Indiana's first nursery school on campus, and this is the playground you see, and Amelia Earhart is visiting. It's right outside of what was the Home Ec building then and is now Matthews Hall. Mary wrote a popular textbook for elementary schools published by Little Brown and Company. It sold for $1.26. And it's interesting that Mary wrote the preface of it on her 38th birthday in 1920, the year that women got the right to vote. So in 1922, Mary spearheaded the construction of the Home Economics Building, which was renamed Matthews Hall.
Running around.
The same year, the School of Home Economics was renamed the College of Consumer and Family Sciences. In 2010, the school merged into the newly created College of Health and Human Sciences. And if you go by there today, you'll see that those words are actually engraved into the stone, and they've been covered up with slabs of cement. So you can still see the slabs that are over those words. So today's students and faculty may walk past Matthews Hall unaware of its history, but Mary's mark is in the foundation of the building, named in her honor, and the roots of the College of Health and Human Sciences. So the paths of Mary Matthews and Lella Gaddis were divided literally and figuratively. Mary was on the north side of State Street on Purdue's campus, creating her home economics department in the home economics building, today's Matthews Hall. And Lella was on the south side of State Street with her home base in agricultural extension. She brought science into the home as the first state leader of home demonstration agents in the extension service. Today, those agents are called educators. She and the agents she hired provided vital home demonstrations such as canning, sewing, safe food practices, and more. Mary Matthews and Lella Gaddis had a bit of a rivalry going, yet their common ground was to educate women. So the top photo of the cover is a typical classroom in the Department of Home Economics. That was Mary's realm and her path. The photo below is of Lella and with her demonstration suitcase resting on the running board of her model. She hung on as she tooled down the country road past Indiana cornfields. So Divided Paths is a book of layers. It's about Purdue women in the early part of the 20th century, about what it was like to be a woman at that time, but also it's about the Lafayette, West Lafayette community, Indiana, and America. In 1911, Purdue trustees established an agricultural extension department. The mission: help people help themselves by taking the university to the people. Mary Matthews, and there they are, taking the university to the people. I love that picture of the women on the car. But Mary Matthews, there she is third from the right. A tall, dark-haired woman, aged 29, first appeared on the Purdue scene as an extension domestic science instructor. Mary was hired by George Christie, who became director of agricultural extension. So technically, Mary was the first extension instructor for domestic science. In 1912, Mary became the head of the Department of Domestic Science, and then it was in the School of Science. She hired Lella Gaddis to teach in the 1914 summer school. There were not many women faculty members on campus at this time, so they all knew one another. Mary designed courses, found teachers, and attempted to attract women students in a time when she had little support.
One of them might be in the meat drawer, the meat cheese drawer.
In fact, Purdue was one of the last land-grant universities to establish a Department of Household Economics, which for the most part was the course that brought women to universities then. President Winthrop Stone stalled when it came to establishing the department. He was an outdoorsy man, and in Divided Paths, you can read about his first wife, who left him in 1911 to join the cult of yoga. That is what is said in the New York Times story about the scandalous fact that his wife left him to practice the cult of yoga. So, and you'll also read about his shocking demise. He fell to his death shortly after becoming the first person to climb to the summit of Ian Mountain in the Canadian Rockies. He was with his second wife at that point, and she survived. So the book is primarily about Mary Matthews and Lella Gaddis. However, it is also about two other women who were significant in their lives. If you are familiar with Purdue, when I say the name Virginia Claypool Meredith, you may think of Meredith Hall. In fact, I lived in Meredith Hall. I am. The residence hall was named after her posthumously in 1965, and this is the painting of her displayed in the lobby there. Yet Virginia had nothing to do with the actual Meredith Hall. Instead, she had something to do with two other buildings that were very important. The construction of Purdue Memorial Union at the top there, and what is today Dumey Hall as part of Windsor Residence Hall, and it was the first women's residence hall, and it took Virginia 13 years of striving to see it built. So in 1921, Virginia became the first woman on Purdue's board of trustees. And Virginia's story is that her husband died unexpectedly in 1882, and she took over the management of the 115-acre farm in Cambridge City, Indiana, with prized cattle and sheep, and became a lady farmer, which was very unconventional for the time. Eventually, Virginia would speak at Farmers Institute, precursor to agricultural extension demonstrations. She became a nationally recognized speaker and writer. Then, 7 years after Virginia became a lady farmer, her best friend, Hattie Matthews, was dying. Hattie was such a good friend of Virginia that she named her young son Meredith. Well, Hattie asked Virginia if she would adopt her 2 children when she was gone, and Virginia consented. So at the age of 40, a widow, Virginia adopted 7-year-old Mary Matthews and her 2-year-old brother, Meredith. Of course, Mary would grow up to become Purdue's first dean of the School of Home Economics. Virginia was a wonderful role model for Mary, who traveled with her mother as she spoke at Farmers Institute. Many people thought Virginia was Mary's aunt because she called her auntie. Lella Gaddis took the teachings of Purdue to rural women who worked from dawn until dusk for their families. Often what they knew of running a household, raising children, and working the farm was handed down by word of mouth from their mothers. Most had no electricity or running water. They knew nothing of nutrition, sanitation, and food preservation. Through home demonstrations, Lella and her staff changed the lives of Indiana women. They also began home demonstration clubs, later called home economics clubs, which still exist today. This is my favorite photo of Lella. It's 1918 during World War I, and extension agents are in high demand. Lella's mission is to help farm women learn how to conserve wheat, meat, sugar, and other foods for the war effort. She is impeccably dressed as always, and you can see her natural energy and drive are quite evident in her stance. This portrait of Lella Gaddis on the right was painted by Randolph Coates and presented by the Indiana Home Economics Association to Purdue in 1941 on behalf of Lella's 25th year of service. For many years, the painting was displayed in Purdue's Agricultural Administration building. Then it disappeared. It was found years later in the attic in the Ag building with the frame broken and a tear in the canvas. Lella's portrait had been taken down and replaced with a portrait of Earl Buck. Thank you for laughing. After Lella's family expressed their displeasure, the portrait was refurbished and hung in Matthews Hall, where it is today. So when Divided Paths Common Ground was published, it came to light the fact that Mary Matthews was not recognized with a portrait in the building named in her honor. The Mary L. Matthews Club, which Mary started after she retired in '68 and still exists today, the Mary L. Matthews Club and the Purdue Women's Club joined forces to create a portrait. And I'm happy to say that on October 26, 2012, a portrait of Mary Matthews was dedicated in Matthews Hall. And there's Ava Goebel. She got to be there. And on the right with Chris Laddish, who was then the inaugural first dean of the College of Health and Human Sciences. So this is 1902, and Lella Gaddis is on the left and her sister Kate on the right. The little boy is their nephew, Paul, whom they adored. Kate was 9 years older than her sister Lella. The sisters lived together their entire lives, for neither married, because they couldn't be married and have their careers. Back then, once a woman married, it was understood that she would quit her job. Kate was a school teacher for more than 50 years at Washington School in Lafayette. Here are all the Gaddis siblings and their spouses. Lella is second from the right, and Kate is next to her. You can see their personalities and their body language. Lella met life head on, and she was very sure of herself. Kate was a homebody, who kept many of her thoughts hidden. On one of my visits with Miriam Epplheath to learn more about her great aunts, Lella and Kate Gaddis, Miriam told me that Kate had kept diaries, and perhaps there was some information in the diaries that would help me in writing the book. Miriam left the room and returned with an old light blue shoebox. On the lid is an image of a nurse, and the copy reads, "The clinic shoe, nothing could be finer." Miriam lifted the lid, and inside were 18 leather-bound, let me go back, 18 leather-bound diaries. They are line-a-day diaries with about an inch of space allotted for each 24 hours. Faithfully, Kate wrote a few lines about her life each day for 40 years, from 1906 until 1946, and I read every word. Kate was 38 when she first wrote in her diaries, and she died at age 78. Kate wrote about everyday happenings like ironing. Whoops. Get to where I need to be here. There we go. There's Kate. She wrote about everyday happenings like ironing. She mentioned ironing often. Everything had to be ironed back then. She talked about canning cherries, killing a chicken for dinner, and teaching her students she called little deers. Kate also talked of Purdue events and world events, the sinking of the Titanic, the Greater Lafayette Flood of 1913, and both world wars. The diaries are like a who's who of famous names of Purdue University, Indiana, and America. Lella and Kate were very close to the men of the Purdue Agricultural Department. They dined at each other's homes and spent holidays together. The day Miriam allowed me to take the shoebox of diaries to my writing studio began my journey of getting to know Kate and Lella. In 5 months, I read nearly 40 years of Kate's life and her inner thoughts. She wrote her last words in December of 1946, and I read those last words in December 2010. As the snow fell outside my window, I read Kate's words about her last Christmas, and they were prophetic. It was hard because I had just gained a friend, and then I had to lose her. When I read one of her final entries in 1945 diary, I knew immediately how I was to end Divided Paths. The ending could be profound. As I read the last diary and had to say goodbye, it hit me. I realized I was the guardian of Kate's words. As I sprinkled quotes of Kate's diaries throughout the book, I was the one picking and choosing which of her private thoughts would go out into the world, and the responsibility was humbling. In closing, I want to say that Divided Paths contains many compelling vignettes, and I won't give too much away. However, I will say, thanks to Kate's diaries, I discovered a romance that may surprise you if you know the Purdue world. Lella had a friendship with a prominent Purdue man, David Ross, a member of Purdue's Board of Trustees, a major benefactor to the university. Ross State Stadium is just one example of his generosity. So Mary Matthews and Lella Gaddis educated women at Purdue University and throughout Indiana. When we educate women, we better their lives and better the lives of their children. We better communities and the world. I'll end with a quote from Anna K. Williams, who was an early home economic extension agent. Anna said, "I'm grateful for working in the extension department for a total of 30 years. Miss Gaddis was our boss. She was a strong person who made us feel like we were going to change the world. And to some extent, I guess we really did." I am open to questions.
Randy, who on campus at that time was really pushing to have women faculty? Where did that impetus come from?
It came from Virginia Meredith, and it came from Mary Matthews.
Right?
Really, they were the
Who
two.
brought them into the campus situation?
I think they saw what was going on around other campuses who were way they had their home economics department so much earlier than, like Kansas State had one so much earlier. And they saw that Purdue was lagging behind and they kept pushing him. And finally, I think it was just kind of he was the last one and he was just kind of gave up. So that was your President Stone. Yeah, with Stone. Mm-hmm.
So the extension dimension of the departments was a way for the university, which could be so to broader parts of the community, rural, farming, might feel so foreign to this intellectual kind of enclave of the university.
Yeah.
The extension was to sort of make friends in a way with the broader community, especially women.
Uh,
Only women?
no, it was big part was agriculture,
Oh, that's right.
and home economics was just a little in tandem with ag, because ag was the big boy. And so, but it's part of the land grant mission, and it still is. And that's why there are still extension educators out there in every department to take the knowledge of the university out into the state and educate the people. So that is a land grant mission. So that's the reason that this was established. Yeah. Yep.
After Lola would do a visit,
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure what they call them, training sessions or.
In the homes, they were domestic science demonstrations. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Were those the names of those women who participated in that particular event? Did she follow up with them in some ways?
Yes, I think there would be multiple times that she and her agents, not just her, but would return to the same groups. And then that's how those home economic clubs were eventually formed from that. And so, yes, and she was seen as a I mean, how many women who lived on a farm in a really hard life with a lot of children saw a woman like Lola coming down the road in a car? That was an amazing thing. And I think they looked up to her, and she had all this knowledge, and her agents, not just her, things they had never even heard of, like bacteria, and, they wouldn't even know sanitation and all those kinds of things. That was all fairly new in the education realm. So,
do the records show any kind of interest in, or even if there's any like data that would have shown, did those visits and the gradual emergence of the greater and greater number of the clubs, did it have a kind of, intended or not, by design or accident, did it have an impact in terms of helping women in the broader community feel like they could come to the university and succeed in getting their education?
yes, plus there was the annual Home and Family Conference, which was at Purdue until maybe, I don't know if it's been 10 years ago. Now it's like in Indianapolis. But it was in tandem with the agriculture conference on campus. So it brought women from those clubs to the university setting. Maybe they'd never walked on a college campus before. And so it definitely educated women. And then Lola had the idea when she retired in the 60s to start a cooperative house, which there are many cooperative houses at Purdue, but start one specifically for home economics majors. And it's called Twin Pines, and it's still going. But it was totally funded by the clubs across the state. Each woman would give $1. And that's how that was built. And then Eva Goebel, who succeeded Lola, who I told you was the mentor for my book, she's the one who had to actually get the Twin Pines Cooperative up and going. And so it was, of course, now it's for any major, but in the beginning, it was all home economics majors lived there. So it definitely just compounded and really affected women's lives in a great way that I think a lot of people don't even know about. So, yes. very important.
I'm gonna guess that you read The Queen of Agriculture in the.
Yes, yeah, it was one of my sources too, yes.
I want to go back and kind of use something from that book for a question you asked Pete. Purdue University hired Virginia Meredith in the late 1800s to teach farmers how to farm. She was raised on a farm, she married into a farm family, and in the late 1800s, they hired her to teach farmers how to farm. She was very impressive, absolutely impressive. Yeah, I can tell you more about her, but.
Yeah, that's Queen of American Agriculture by Fred Woodford. And yes, it's her whole biography, and she was well ahead of her time, and
Well, there's like 3 different things in that book that tie back to me in some weird way. So
Yeah.
So,
yes, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, that's how I learned about her for this book. And when I first learned that she'd adopted Mary Matthews, because no one really told me that when I started writing the book, I was dumbfounded.
some being called Meredith that made the reading even more fun.
Yes.
Is it first name Meredith or last name Meredith?
Exactly, and it was always confusing, really, yeah, so. But she was head of the committee to build the union. And it took a long time because people didn't honor their pledges, so it took a lot longer than anticipated. But she gets very little credit for that. She was really spearheading that, and it's lost to history that she was the person behind it. By the time it opened, she was in her 80s, so.
As a total aside, she was one of the 2 women that was the head of the lady managers at the Chicago World Fair.
Yes.
She and
Yeah.
Mrs. Palmer pretty single-handedly ran the ladies part of that fair.
Yes. Yeah. And she was often introduced as the Queen of American Agriculture, and it was tied to the World's Fair and a speech she had given once, where she was introduced as that, and then that stuck, and then she would be introduced as the Queen of American. That's why Fred named his book that. So.
And then as a total aside, I actually had a book that was Mary Matthews. Somebody had given it to me.
It belonged to her?
Yeah, her writing, her name.
Oh, wow.
And I turned it over to Purdue Archive.
Oh, neat. That's neat. Was it a textbook
It
or?
was a textbook.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember, because I had a tailoring book that I gave to a costumer that I don't remember whose is any name that was in it, but Mary Matthews' name was in. I had 2 books. One of them had her name in it, the other one
Yeah,
may not have been hers, but they were some kind of a textbook.
neat.
She was such an impressive woman, you think. Did she give credit in her life or identify who she thought had been most influential in terms of encouraging her
I think
towards
she
what?
was self-made.
She was, but her father also encouraged her. And that's in Fred's book, and it's some in my book about how he would take her with him when he, in his horse and buggy to look at the fields and probably, talked about what was going on. So she was prepped in a way through that.
She didn't stand in her way.
No, of course, he died, then her parents died, so everyone died, and so there she was. And a lot of times, successful women, that's what happens. Lillian Gilbreth, because her husband died, it's just, because her name was left off a lot of their journals that they wrote, they co-authored and all. So that's kind of what happened. She was the only one left standing. Yeah, so, yeah.
Mary and Dorothy Stratton co-write a book on etiquette.
That was Helen Schliemann. Yeah, the dean, she's on the right in those 2 pictures, and she's on the very far left of the dean's walking on the book cover there. Yeah, they were, they co-wrote that book together. Yeah, so. Yeah, I don't know if there were any Zoom questions. Hello out there in Zoom world.
I don't, Angie, this is Leslie. I don't see any in the chat
Okay.
window. But if any of our Zoom listeners do have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask that now. Doesn't look like we have any, Angie.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, I'm here with books if anyone's interested in one, and I really thank all of you for coming out on Zoom and here, and it was great fun to see people in person again. I hadn't given a presentation in so long. I had to you know, reboot myself. So, fun to see everybody. Thank you.